It's your decision, Your Grace. But if we're gonna be allies in this war, it's important for the Northerners to see us as allies. If we sail to White Harbor together, I think it sends a better message.
We sail together.
Hey everybody, we got new Game of Thrones to talk about. This is actually a re-upload because there was like a little bit that there was some confusion about, so I wanted to clarify about the origin of Jon Snow's name, as well as some of the big battles that are going to be happening during Season 8. Some of them we know about, but there's some new evidence to suggest some interesting stuff for the final battle. So there's a new round of the giveaway. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this video. So I'll start with a little bit of history for some of the other new locations too, like White Harbor. The really cool thing is that the Stark that effectively established White Harbor as an outpost for House Stark was named Jon Stark. That was right before the War of Conquest. So when Aegon conquered the Seven Kingdoms, the Stark who knelt, the King of the North, was named Torrhen Stark, so that was his descendant. Before that, the King of the North was named Jon Stark, Jon. So while Jon Snow was directly named for Jon Arryn, people that were close to Ned Stark, you get an idea where that Jon name came from. It wasn't like they were going outside the family. He was still giving him a Stark name, albeit with an interesting origin. So that kind of gives you an idea for where Ned Stark came up with the name Jon when it was time to name the baby. Obviously, we know that his name is supposed to be Aegon, so he had to come up with a different name to disguise who he was.
His name is Aegon Targaryen.
So now we know he didn't just pull it out of thin air, so it makes sense that the name Jon flows through the Stark family. Names recur all the time, like Brandon, Brandon the Builder, Bran in present day, Brandon that was Ned Stark's older brother. So before the War of Conquest, eventually Sea Raiders started to use that as a landing point for incursions. So the King of the North, Jon Stark, built a fort there called the Wolf's Den. It's still there today, but as with all things in the big cities of Game of Thrones and Westeros, the old fort became impractical, so they built a new castle, literally called the New Castle, that eventually became the seat of House Manderly, and they turned the Wolf's Den, this old fort that was near the waterfront, into a prison. There were first men that used to live in this area in an even smaller settlement, but they really just used it as a small ring fort. Like there's a rock called Seal Rock that's just crowned with a ring fort. It's just this really primitive structure. But by the time they got into the War of Conquest, it had been abandoned for centuries. So if we get to see some of these structures when Jon Snow and Daenerys land there during Season 8, they'll probably accomplish that with a little bit of CG. I'm not expecting them to spend too much time in White Harbor because they're trying to get everybody to Winterfell. That will probably happen during the course of the first episode. So you're literally talking them landing and then sort of like a cross cut to them rolling up to Winterfell. So like just a big time jump somewhere in the episode. White Harbor itself is right down here next to Moat Cailin, so when it's not snowing like the world's going to end, it looks a little bit like the weather you'd see around Moat Cailin, although it's not nearly quite as boggy. The interesting thing about that is that it didn't always used to look like that. It looked like the rest of the North until the Children of the Forest during the War with the First Men tried to crack Westeros in half using the Hammer of Waters, again, unsuccessfully. And what ended up happening is they caused this big flood that turned the area into this big boggy mire. So you just have to picture the Children of the Forest literally trying to break this continent in half, right down here, right below Greywater Watch along this line here. But there have actually been a number of other houses before House Manderly to hold White Harbor. There were Flints, Locks, Slates, Longs, Holts, Ashwoods. The Manderleys only took up residence sometime before the War of Conquest when one of the Gardner kings drove them out of the Reach because their previous seat was down here in Dustinbury. So you have to imagine House Manderly, the Mander River, so you get the idea. But ever since the conquest, they've held White Harbor, and then obviously you imagine what happened to House Gardner during the conquest. That was the end of their house as well. But moving to a different location, they're building out a lot of big castle sets at their Belfast location where their big main studio is. They do a lot of interior shoots there where they have to do special effects or anything that's really weird that they can't do at the big practical sets where they would film all their big King's Landing scenes. A lot of those locations are protected historical areas. So like if they want to do a big battle, they have to be careful not to destroy anything. So they have to film the really hardcore stuff back at their studio. So a bunch of trebuchets have showed up outside what looks like their King's Landing set that they're building. So it sounds like they're preparing for a big final battle with Daenerys' army because they were the last army we saw using trebuchets during Season 4 during the Siege of Meereen. So it sounds like someone's either going to be sieging King's Landing or the trebuchets belong to Cersei and she's going to be using them against the army of the dead. So timeline refresher, they just started doing their cast read-throughs of the final scripts and started shooting with the actors, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be shooting the scenes in order. So like if they have a big battle scene to film that requires a lot of big practical sets that they have to build, they start doing that right away. They actually give all of the scripts as necessary to the production crew that have to build the sets and do the costumes and all of those things before they give them to the actors, because it doesn't necessarily matter what the characters are saying. The people that have to make all the stuff that they use in the show have to know about that ahead of time because it takes a lot longer to build. So that's why you saw them start building out the Winterfell set. They're building out a bigger facade so they can film exterior shots for Winterfell, big army scenes, way back right as Season 7 was ending, before they'd even finished the scripts for Season 8. There's always going to be a couple really easy things they know they're definitely going to need and will require a ton of extra time, like the big quarry set that they built for Season 7, Episode 6. They literally built themselves a lake, which explains a little bit about how they wrote in reverse, like, okay, we're going to have a big scene here, so how do we get the characters there? It might have only taken them 6 months to film the season, but it took way longer than that to actually build that lake. But what might end up happening for the big scenes at places like the Carhold or the Last Hearth, places where you know the Army of the Dead is probably going to come first, is that they'll just film some small exterior shots where they give it sort of a Highgarden treatment where it might not be a big prolonged battle because there are not that many people there, so it doesn't make sense to blow their wad on really small locations. There's just a big action set piece of the Night King just spraying everything with magic blue fire. But pending them building more big sets that we haven't seen yet, confirm huge battle at Winterfell, confirm huge battle at King's Landing, which makes a lot of sense given where the show started. But as we learn a little bit more, we can talk more about what might be happening in those big battles. Let me know in the comments though, what big battle do you actually think is going to be happening at King's Landing? Like, will it be Cersei versus the Army of the Dead? Or will it be a situation where Jon Snow and Daenerys are able to defeat the Night King earlier in the season and then they bring their armies south for a big final battle with Cersei? I think a lot of people were hoping that the final battle would be something with the Night King, but there's a lot of evidence that seemingly suggests that might not be the case. But a lot of that's still speculation. So what'll happen is I'll have new Game of Thrones this week. I'll announce the giveaway winner when I post that. There's new Walking Dead posting tonight. There's some surprise stuff that just dropped, so I might do a video for that if I have enough time too. But while you wait for everything, you can click here to listen to Sir Davos explain what their episode schedule is going to be, and you can click here to learn about the new cast. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.